So here's the project for the track. It's at 95 BPM. I didn't create the whole track for AllttA. This is sort of like the no vocal version, kind of like the 368 intro version. So let's have a listen. There you go, that's the track. Let's get into it. Now let's go to the first real sound in this and let's look at EXS24. It's orchestral brass trumpets legato. And let's look at the MIDI. Looks like this. And what I did was I sent it to a bus, right? And it's a space designer. And I use a medium space, a room, bright chamber. Now, you can see it's just sent up to maybe about -17. And there's a read on this, an automation read, because at the end of the track, there is a fade out, and that's just it. The rest of the track is pretty much straight. And yeah, let's listen to just the trumpet solo. So you can tell that, you know, there are different velocities here. At the start, it's really soft, and then you got that two-note sort of accent, and they are pretty bright. Although and they are octave as well. Although the high octave is a bit softer, the low octave is louder. And then, so this is sort of like the basic pattern, and then I paired it with studio horns. And in studio horns itself, I use trumpet 3. And on the other side is also studio horns, and I use trumpet 1. And if you look at 15 and 16 over here, you can see that one's panned to the left a little bit here, and one's panned to the right a little bit. So there's sort of like, there's two different horns that are panned left and right. Now, we always remember that we pan left and right. You can't use the same instrument because they're going to sound the same, and it's going to sum to mono anyway. So this is the track. There's a bit of vibrato at the end, which isn't in the original track, but I think it kind of works as well. So if you pair these three up, so it's got that brassy feel about it. But the important thing, I'm going to skip a couple of these first. And the important thing that's really carrying the chords is actually the string ensemble. And if you look at it, you can see it here. All the chords that are being played by the string ensemble. And it's under orchestral strings, string ensemble. And I EQ'd it quite a bit. I just brought all these highs and high mids up because in the original track, that's kind of sounds as well. The sound has that kind of bumped up highs. It's a particular kind of effect. It's not realistic, but it's a particular kind of effect. Now, here's how it sounds. And paired with that, also is the low end side of it. So these are just playing the low notes. Together they sound like this. And with the horns, so now back to the end part of it. I felt like this section needed a bit of a lift, so it sounds like this, right? And I decided to add a French horn crescendo, orchestral brass, French horns crescendo, because it does get louder and the texture does get bigger. It's not just a matter of volume automation, it's sort of like texture changes, especially for wind and brass instruments. Now, and this is the low end. I use orchestral brass trombones, and it sounds like that. And you notice in this case, I wanted it to sort of be quite dry, because the samples that you use, they sort of cut off really quickly. So I didn't want a lot of tail end to it when they cut off. I think it kind of works. So that is the sort of chordal bit. Now there's this sort of interjection here. That's a pretty straightforward one. You can pick a vintage electric piano, and I picked a Bright Suitcase. You can see from here, Bright Suitcase, a preset. Probably mucked around with it a little bit. The original sound was pretty okay as it was. Sent it to the same reverb. It's not a big reverb, but it makes a difference. If you take out the reverb, it's really dry. So this is much better. And that is paired with sort of like a side stick kind of sound. Now, I didn't have anything that's really close to the original. I found some percussion and orchestral kit. And this one's sort of like a sort of stick kind of sound. And it wasn't high enough, so I actually pitch shifted it. I put a pitch shift plugin. You can find it under pitch shifter. And I changed the timing to drums. And I pushed it up by 6 semitones and 100% mix. That gave it a bit more of a clicky kind of sound. Without the pitch shift. So it's not so sort of sticky. So I turn it on and it works together with the piano. Yeah. And then you have your kick. And it's a pretty straightforward under drums, single drums, drums and percussion, single drums, kicks, electronic kicks. This is a C1. It's always played at C1. And it's number 8. So it sounds like that. Let's take out the EQ here. Pretty unremarkable kick, but I think it suits the purpose. I EQ'd all the top end off. I shelved it off. And here's how it sounds. Sort of this muffled deep kick. And I think that works pretty well. And we pair it with some percussion. Now I use an Ultra Beat here. Ultra Beat. And I picked the drum bank's percussion bank. And you get this little pattern over here. It's just like a flam kind of thing. And then more percussion over here under drums and percussion acoustic drum kits studio brush kit. And this sounds like that. Yeah, just little like percussive sounds. Yeah, it kind of works. So when you put it together, it sounds like this. So that kind of works for that. And it's pretty straightforward. You get extra little bits here and there. Yeah. And for this, you can leave it a bit looser to get the organic feel. Some of the stuff I quantized, some I didn't. The kicks are obviously quantized to fourths. And then this is copied over, this second repetition of it, except there's this extra electric piano as well. And the preset that I use is a classic electric piano. And the notes look like this. And there's a low end as well. And together they go. So they work together with the strings and the brass and everything. I really like the combination of instruments. And then let's get to the big section. Now, these parts here aren't very different, but as new string sections, which is EXS strings 2, that you can find under pop strings, EXS strings 2. And this one's panned to the right, paired with EXS strings 1, which is paired to the left. These two are off the same track, and these two are off the same track as well. So EXS strings 1 is panned to the left, EXS strings 2 is panned to the right. So it gives that wide kind of feeling, and EXS strings 2 is playing this. So it's just this octave. EXS strings 1 is playing this. Now they're playing the same things. You can see the names are the same because I copied them over. EXS strings 2, EXS strings 2. The low end as well is the same thing. Sounds unremarkable by themselves, but when you pair these together, the lows and the highs and the splits, like the left and right, here's how they sound. It's much wider and bigger, especially because strings 2 and strings 1 have a different kind of texture. And that's kind of it for the big string section. And you pair it with the brass and strings. So it's this really thick kind of close chords where all the notes of the chords are fairly close together. So now there's some little percussions happening. It's not much of it, right? Same things with the right suitcase piano. Now here is where it gets a bit bigger. We have our percussions as well from before, but we've added a new kick. Now this kick sounds like this. And it's just a simple kick from the Kicks electronic kicks. This is a 25, so it's slightly different one from the other one. And that's number 8. This is 25, and it's different texture, that's all. And I paired this kick with a hat from Drums and Percussion Acoustic Drum Kit's Dry Standard Kit. Now you can see that the patterns are the same. So you get some sort of accents with the sort of hats working out with the kicks as well. A bit more punch. Yeah, without it, it's just the kick by itself. So this one gives it a bit more decay. Feels punchier. Now on this side, we have our snares. And it's under single drum snares, electronic snares, D114, so it should be played on D1. And they sound like that. Nice and aggressive. It's not exactly like the original, but I think it captures the mood and the feel of the original, and that would have been enough. But I thought I'd pair it with another layer snare. Now these snares under single drum snares, layer snares, are good for sort of layering on top of snares, as the name implies. This one's a body snare. So, let's take the EQ out. It sounds like this. Yeah, simple sort of like body snare. I added a bit more EQ to give it like some real high end, take out all the low end. And paired with it, sounds like this. Nice and punchy. Now for the bass, which I really like because the sound is sort of like this deep, deep bass. I use an ES2 synthesizer, and I went for a synth bass preset, and it's a Wookiee bass. And I definitely mucked around with the cutoffs and the sounds a little bit because it sounds a little bit more aggressive. But I think it works very well with everything. Yeah, so this Wookiee bass is really fun. It's also automated because as you can see right at the end, all these tracks are sort of fading out. That's for the vlog style exit. Now, the fun bit, the most fun bit of this is that little crazy synth that goes. Yep. Now, I wanted to create it from scratch, and then I got a little bit lazy and decided to look for a synth that sounded like it. I found this drifter synth. It sounds really different from what it sounds like now, but the basic sort of pitch, sort of every time you play a note, it sort of rises to that note because there's an envelope here mucking around with pitch 1, 2, 3. This envelope 2, which is this thing here, is affecting pitch of 1, 2, and 3 by this amount, right? Negatively this way. So you can pull this up and down and see the difference of what it makes. Get the project, play around with this because this is the super fun part. The envelope here also messes around with how quickly the pitch moves, especially with the time and the decay and the attack as well. So yeah, I would suggest just playing around with it because it's super fun. Now together with everything, it sounds like that. Let's take out the strings. Now this part here, you can see it sort of goes up and goes down. Yeah, so you can see that there's sort of MIDI going on here. Let me show you what's going on. There's a pitch bend that's just sort of like going down because this track here doesn't, it sort of just goes up. And then this pitch sort of pulls it down. So that's how I got that particular sound. And then there's a very subtle thing at the end of this phrase, which is just like a square wave that sounds like that. Like a computer game kind of sound, right? So I decided to create this from scratch. I just used the user default. I only use oscillator 1. I use a square wave, and that's kind of it. I took a bit of the, I filtered a bit of the high end off. And it's got that computer game kind of sound. So that, you know, 8-bit kind of sound is a square wave. Yeah. And that's kind of just hidden there. And of course, this drifter is playing a different kind of a pattern. But essentially, it's just the same thing. And something to bear in mind, this is the only time that little riser thing has a harmony, and you can see the harmony here. And I think that's a pretty nice touch on the arranging side. So there you have it.